virtual learners, to another edition of Too Good for Drugs. In our last lesson, we talked about managing our emotions. We talked about using empathy. And it's better to understand and identify with the emotions of others. Now, you were able to recognize emotions of others by simply just looking at their faces. And today, in our lesson, our next lesson, we talk about communication, which is lesson 4. Now, with communication, there's many forms of communication, both written and spoken, body language, and tone of voice. Now, communication gets tricky, however, when the speaker's words, tone of voice, and body language doesn't match. They become mixed messages. So in today's lesson, we're going to try and figure out a better way to communicate and how to be an effective communicator. Now, there are 3 types of communication style. There's aggressive, there's passive, and there's assertive. Now with aggressive communication, that's more a pushy style. Loud, tone of voice, not really respecting the listener, and kind of a demanding communication style. Now with passive communication style is more of a quiet tone of voice, not too sure of yourself, timid, and you really don't get your point across with passive. Now the best communication style is assertive, which is confident tone of voice, you're sure of yourself, and you're looking that person in the eye. Now, I want everybody to turn to page 9 in the section titled, Say It Like You Mean It. And on page 9, it tells you speaking style and the assertive way of speaking, and we're going to read the characteristics and body language cues. Now, for characteristics of an assertive speaker, it's someone who prepares words, speaks up, not too loud, not too quiet, use appropriate tones, not sarcastic tone, or not rude, reads nonverbal cues. And body language cues for an assertive speaker is looks confident, stands tall, makes eye contact, and matches nonverbal cues to words. Now, on the Say It Like You Mean It section, there are 2 scenarios that we're going to read. Now, for number 1, the scenario is your next door neighbor's dog has been waking you up at 5:30 a.m. with his incessant barking. Your mom tells you to speak to your neighbor yourself. Now, as an assertive speaker, what would you say and how would you say it? So try to think of an assertive way, as hard as that can be. Try to think of an assertive way to talk to your neighbor. Now, number 2, you're working on a group science project due next week, but you find out that someone on the team has not started working on his section. The whole team's grade will be affected. Now, you know you need to convince your teammate to get busy. Now, as an assertive speaker, how would you say it, and what would you say? And try to think of assertive ways to say it, all right, as hard as that can be. And look at the characteristics on top of the page 9, where it says Say It Like You Mean It, and the body language cues, all right? Now, how does it feel to speak to someone who leans away from you and with their arms crossed and isn't looking at you while you speak? It can be hurtful, right? Especially if you are someone who really likes to talk to your friends and tell them everything about your day. It can be hurtful. You can see that they're not really respecting you as a friend. Now, we all want, on the other hand, want a friend who leans towards you, looks relaxed, and they look at you while you're speaking. These are called active listeners. Now, I want everybody to look on the same page as page 9, and in the section titled Listen Like You Mean It. And these are the characteristics and body language cues of an active listener. Now, active listener is someone who listens empathetically, does not interrupt, asks clarifying questions, and paraphrases. And body language cues for an active listener is looks interested, makes eye contact, attentive posture, and using affirming gestures like nods heads and says things like, I see. Now, when everybody look at section Listen Like You Mean It on the scenario number 1 and 2, and we're going to read these together. Now, number 1, a friend stops you in the hallway and says, "I'm tired of the cliques around here. Coach Smith keeps excluding me during PE. Jasmine avoids me to hang out with the popular girls. You are confused and you need more information." Now, what would an active listener do in this situation? Be specific. Now, number 2, your teammate walks up to you in the gym. His voice and body language shows frustration, even some fear. You know he has been training hard and is a perfectionist. He nervously begins to tell you how he feels, but it's difficult for him to get the words out. What would an active listener do in this situation? Be specific. Now, an active listener demonstrates a good friend is someone who shows respect to you, such as a assertive speaker. Now, I want everybody to turn to page 10 in the section titled Listen Up. And we're going to do example image together. But at home, you can work with a partner, a sibling, or a friend, and you all can trade roles of being the speaker and a listener. And what you're going to do at home is you want to shade in 4 different shapes. And at home, you can be the speaker and try to explain to your listener, wherever it is at home, how to shade in these shapes. But we're going to do the example image on page 10 together, all right? So I want you to listen closely and try to do your best on the example image to shade in each shape that I explain, all right? So I'm going to be the speaker and you're going to be the listener. Now, I want you to look at the bottom half of the image on the example image. And there are 4 triangles that form the bottom half of the image. Focus on the 2 large triangles that form on the square on the bottom left of the image. Now shade in the large triangle on the top right of the square. I'll say it again. Shade in the large triangle on the top right of the square. Now focus on the 2 large triangles that form the square at the bottom right of the image. Shade in the large triangle on the top left of the square. I'll say it again. Shade in the large triangle on the top left of the square. Now these 2 shaded in the triangle should form a point in the middle of the bottom line of the image. Now shade in the medium triangle that is immediately above and in the middle of the 2 large triangles you shaded in. I'll say it again. Shade in the medium triangle that is immediately above and in the middle of the 2 large triangles you shaded in. Now shade in the parallelogram that is immediately left of the medium triangle that you just shaded in. It's only parallelogram in the image. I'll say it again. Shade in the parallelogram that is immediately left of the medium triangle you just shaded in. It's the only parallelogram in the image. Now look at the right side of the medium triangle you just shaded in. Shade in the small triangle to the right of the medium triangle. I'll say it again. Shade in the small triangle to the right of the medium triangle. Now finally, shade in the small triangle that is immediately beside the small triangle you just shaded in. I'll say it again. Finally, shade in the small triangle that is immediately beside the small triangle you just shaded in. It should form a point with a large triangle in the middle of the right-hand side of the image. Now, if your example image, which is on page 10, looks like this, then you follow directions correctly. If not, then try your best to get it to look like the diamond on page 10 or on this paper. Now, becoming an effective communicator takes practice. And we can build strong relationships when we communicate our thoughts and feelings effectively. In our next lesson, we will put our communication skills to work in building relationships. Thank you.